to introduce the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and a very warm welcome to everyone to the third day of workshop, The Spiritual Ranges of Mind. And brace yourself and put on your seat belts. Today, Dr. Basu is going to take us to the higher mind and the illumined mind. Yesterday, he took us to deeper ranges of cognition, and today we travel, the exploration goes on, and we travel to the higher mind and the illumined mind. So over to you, Dr. Basu.
Thank you, Monica and James. So today we'll move to the spiritual mind range, and as Monica said, to the ranges which Shobindu described as the high mind, which is there above our usual cognitive status, and beyond that, that's the illumined mind. So they are the first stepping stones, but we will share screen and we'll go to the slides and we'll follow from the way we think, and we'll follow from there to the domain of the higher mind. So we start with this, that usually what we do in common parlance, we think with words. That's something habitual, just by habit that we go on doing it. From our childhood we have learned. But one step above that is if you can think with idea. This is because one idea can be translated into many words. So there's a difference between thinking with words and thinking with idea, because each idea can be translated into many ways, into many types of words. So you expand your horizon. So we are talking about the our ordinary cognitive experience, where when we shift from thinking with words to think with ideas, we are already making a shift to something broader, because then we can express each idea into many types of words, many different combinations of words. And then together with that, there is another thing called lateral thinking. So on the same subject, you can think in different ways. The same subject, you can think in very different ways on the same thing, but at the level of the ordinary cognition. You see, there are people like Michel Foucault and who used to do lateral thinking, and why that type of writings that they did from lateral thinking, why they become very popular. For example, I will give you an example of lateral thinking. You know that this habit of confessing in the church. You see, people go and confess in the church. So there is we have a moralistic viewpoint that you confess your sins and then it will be worked upon by the divine through the priest who is there. Now there are many ideas whether this confession is working or not. Mother had said, our mother, Mira mother, that when she was a child, she had gone to a church and there was a confession going on, and then she yelled because she actually saw a very big vital force, a giant behind the confession box. And afterwards she told that the priest inside the confession box was not the right person to confess. And instead of going to the divine, all the innocent words of the people, they were going and getting sucked up by a vital force, vital entity, by an asura. So actually it was being counterproductive. Now this is one way mother says about an occult perspective. Mother is bringing an occult perspective. Michel Foucault thinks in a different way, a lateral thinking. He says, but that confession is not a very, very old thing. It has happened for several hundred years, not very old, and it happened because the kings were wanting to take data from the people, private data from the people, and according to that, that will be useful for their administration. So now when all this biometric data collection and all is going on, that Michel Foucault's words, I remember many times, that is also some way of, that is also one way to think. So there's a lateral thinking of the same thing, you can think in different ways. And you see, it's not that the same phenomenon can be expressed in only one way by yourself, but you yourself can come up in a different explanation, again from the same level of your cognitive consciousness. But this is one thing, thinking with words, thinking with ideas. Lateral thinking also falls in the domain of thinking with ideas. But then, this is what Mother was very fond of telling, that you can think with experience also, and then that becomes totally different. Think with an experience, because each experience can be translated into many ideas. Each experience can be translated into many ideas, and each idea can be translated into many words. So you see that the scope of our thinking increases. The scope of our thinking increases in horizon as we shift from words to ideas to think with experience. We had an experience and we start thinking with that experience. So already you are then going, you can go when you are thinking with experience even beyond your cognitive status. When you have gone to a spiritual place and suddenly there was an experience of something that you couldn't describe, that you couldn't suddenly describe, but then afterwards you could understand it through many types of ideas, and then you could express it in many different ways. So that thinking with experience is something that we do, but we do it under stress or under duress or under exceptional situations. We are not doing it always, but we can make it a common experience, that to think with experience. When we have an experience, we think following the experience, following the trajectory of the experience, so that the experience comes with ideas and the ideas come with words. And this will come, this thinking with contradictory ideas is actually a stepping stone towards the higher mind. When we go towards the higher mind, we'll talk about this, that you can, the preparation for the higher mind, to be prepared for the higher mind, we have to think with contradictory ideas. Now, it is difficult. It is difficult, but we can be trained to do. We can be trained for thinking with contradictory ideas. If a child can be taught to play chess with oneself, then a child can also be taught to have contradictory ideas on the same subject. So it is a training you have to acquire in education from the very beginning, that how you can think with contradictory ideas. So it is very essential. Today when we come to the higher mind, I will tell you that it is very essential to think with contradictory ideas. In fact, thinking with contradictory ideas and shifting from linear to non-linear thinking are the basic steps we have to take at our level, so that we are prepared to go beyond the mind to the higher mind. So it's not the higher mind, but it's the preparation for going to the higher mind. I love this thing, thinking with contradictory ideas, because you see that one of the main problems in the world today is because of exclusivism in thinking. Mother used that word, exclusivism in thinking. My idea is the highest idea. My idea is the greatest idea. My religion is the only truth. My view is the only thing worth pursuing. What I think is the only truth. Now, you see that the opposite of what I think, that is also true, that we do not know, we do not understand, we are not trained for that. And when I take this thinking with contradictory ideas, it's my very favorite topic. When I usually start a counseling session or counseling class for postgraduate students, the first day I tell my students who are sitting there in front of me, they are all postgraduate students. I've come to start for the master's degree course in social work or counseling. And the first thing that I tell them is, are you here irrespective of your caste, class, religion? Are you the same everywhere? Are you the same? Irrespective of your caste, class, religion, sex, are you everybody same? And then they all say, yes, yes, we are the same. We are the same. Because we are all equal. Then I tell them that similarly there is a level of consciousness, there is a level of consciousness where all contradictory ideas and complementary ideas, they can stay together. As for example, here in this class, irrespective of your sex, class, religion, all of you are students are having the same status. So very high above at the level of your thinking also, that is a plane where all contradictory ideas stay with equal, what you call, with equal strength, with equal degree of power, they are there. So, and this is important. Why? Once you can shift to this domain of contradictory ideas, keeping yourself, holding yourself contradictory ideas, immediately you can be free from dogmatic thinking. You see, when you can accommodate the idea that is opposite to your idea, you can accommodate the idea that is opposite to your idea. I am very much hooked to, say, a particular religion, but I also understand the truth of some other religion, and I also find that that is also true in its own domain. And when I hold these two ideas together, then I cannot have a hatred towards the followers of the other religion. You see that in today's world, one of the ways in which we can have harmony and unity is to shift from the domain of the contradictory ideas to the plane where everything can be kept together. Everything can be kept together. That's what Mother always said, that you have to be free from exclusive thinking, exclusivism. You have to be free from that. So this is very, very important, thinking with contradictory ideas. I think people tell me, is that possible? Of course I say it is possible. As I told you an example, that if a child can be trained to play chess with oneself, then it can also be trained to think with contradictory ideas. You know, Sri Aurobindo's famous aphorism, I know that the opposite of what I say is true. That is Sri Aurobindo's own words. Sri Aurobindo's famous aphorism, I know that the opposite of what I say is true. But Sri Aurobindo was also a bit naughty, so he added another phrase, but at the moment what I say is truer. So that was enforcing something. He was trying to enforce something from a very higher consciousness, and he was wanting to enforce that. But he begins that I know that the opposite of what I say is true. So he admits, Sri Aurobindo himself admits, that in thinking you have to accommodate all contradictory viewpoints. So this is a very interesting thing. I think we should all start, especially those of you who are in counseling, who are in education, you can see that how we can hold different types of ideas together. And is a preparation for going beyond the usual cognitive status with which we are accustomed. And then linear versus non-linear thinking, gradually that has become important. That is becoming important nowadays. You know that because truth, we were telling yesterday, Mother's quotation, the truth is not linear but global, not successive but simultaneous. Therefore, it cannot be expressed in words. It has to be lived. So that means you have to shift to non-linear thinking. You have to shift to non-linear thinking. You see that, for example, in linear thinking, we have a lot of wrong conceptions. For example, of time, we break up time into past, present, and future. But actually, it is a false saying. At every moment, the moment contains the past, and at every moment, the moment contains the potentiality of the future. That moment, at any moment, you consider any moment, it is linked with the past, it has come from the past, it has evolved from the past, and every moment contains the potentiality of the future. Do you think it is easy to have a free moment which is not connected with the past, which is not connected with the unconscious? Are we eligible for free moments? Of course, there is a free moment, but that is deep inside the consciousness. That is a moment that is free. That is a moment that is free from the past, from the unconscious. Otherwise, our conception of past and future are both hooked to the unconscious. Our future also projections we do, based on our things that we have kept in the unconscious. So our moments are not free. Our moments are not fluid. All our moments are like that. So this is, you see, this is linear thinking. When we shift to non-linear thinking, then you understand that you have to think in a global way. You cannot think in that very simplistic terms, but it is difficult. But it is gradually coming. You can see that at present, the global youth mind all over the world is shifting to nonlinear thinking. And it is only when it is shifting to nonlinear thinking that now the whole world's mindset is getting ready to understand Shri Aurobindo. Shri Aurobindo was not understood for so long because it was understood by exceptional individuals, of course. Always exceptional people understood him. Very simple people with great bhakti understood him. But in general, Shri Aurobindo's things were difficult to understand because the mindset of the whole world was not shifting. It has now started to shift, and mind is now wanting to take inputs from everywhere. That is why today reading Harry Potter is doesn't consider to be something which is very shameful. 30 years back, of course, reading Harry Potter, people would have said that, oh, why you are reading all this nonsense stuff. But now the mind knows that it can take truth from everywhere. So that's why you see that people can change disciplines. One, like Kejriwal, he was an engineer, then become an administrative service officer, then become a chief minister. So like that people can shift disciplines also. That is also possible because there is a shift from this linear to non-linear thinking. So people can shift disciplines. One can start as an engineer and can end up as a journalist. So all these things are very common and accepted nowadays. In our times when we were students, this was not acceptable, but now it is acceptable because the world is now viewing this kind of change that is happening. So this is very interesting that from this slide we can understand that if you can think with experience, then that experience can be translated into many ideas, and each idea can be translated into many words. So my repertoire of my cognition increases when I start thinking with experience. And above that, if I can think with contradictory ideas and can shift from the linear to nonlinear thinking, I am making a progress, going to shift from my cognitive status to something higher. So for nonlinear thinking, shift from the outer surface mind to the inner mind. We are talking about that. We have talked about this, that what happened that in our tradition, what happened that our seers who knew that linear thinking was not enough, they shifted to the great void. But shifting to the great void or zero or something that was extending everything. So that was actually a surpassing of all cognitive experience. That was actually a surpassing of all cognitive experience. So one way in which linear thinking was countered by our great seers, mystics, yogis, our rishis, by getting overall cognitive experience, crossing the boundary and going to the great void, which is either a zero or an absolute X. As Shri Aurobindo says that the absolute Brahman of Advaita and the zero of Buddhists, they have come by such exclusion of all cognitive experience, and they are the same thing is seen in different ways. So both the absolute Brahman of Advaita and the great nihil of the Buddhists, they might have fightings between themselves, but Shri Aurobindo says they're the same thing. They have come by the exclusion of all cognition. Shri Aurobindo gives another view. Shri Aurobindo gives absolutely a different view. Instead of surpassing cognition to go beyond cognition, he is trying to have an evolution of the cognitive consciousness. Mind you, an evolution of the cognitive consciousness. The cognitive consciousness itself has to evolve. So we are not surpassing it, we are not leaving it behind to go to the zero or go to the absolute Brahman or anywhere. We are trying to make that also evolve so that it increases in its quality and that it can also take us to the highest truth. So instead of abandoning cognition and jumping over to the great void or Brahman or Nirvana, what you call, Shri Aurobindo gives another viewpoint that you evolve in cognitive consciousness. And through that evolution of cognitive consciousness, you can reach very high cognition, superconscious cognition, and you can bring it down and make it manifest in the earth. So that is also another way, not only of going to the truth, but making the truth dynamic, making the truth dynamic in the earth. Because the other way was also good, but then you have got an experience only of the truth, of the supreme reality. But in this, what Shri Aurobindo says, that evolution of cognitive consciousness, you not only experience the supreme reality, you can make it manifest, make it dynamic in the earth itself. So this is, and that is why we have to, this assumes importance, that how from the inner mind the cognitive consciousness can go on progressing. So then he comes to the spiritual mind range. That's he opens up a spiritual mind range. So he opens up a ladder. He opens up a ladder, and that ladder is a spiritual mind range. Now that is a very interesting thing. Now this is, I would say that just concentrate here. There are two different things here. That is a gradual ascent. We are ascending towards deeper and intense knowledge and power bases. You see, matrices of consciousness force, matrices of Chit Shakti, consciousness and force, they have to be there together. Otherwise, consciousness is not effective. And if force is not accompanied by consciousness, then the force is impotent, or it doesn't know what to do. It is an ignorant force. So both have to be there, consciousness and force. And we are gradually, you can ascend towards deeper and intense knowledge and power bases. But this is one thing. The other very beautiful thing is, actually, that is the grace, that these planes, these higher planes, these higher order knowledge and powers, these planes of consciousness which are above our cognition, or we call the supracognitive planes, they also can descend. Not only we are ascending, not only we are ascending to that supracognitive plane, but the supracognitive plane is also descending. They are also descending. So we are ascending, but the other thing that is also descending, the other thing is also descending. So it's not only that we are ascending, that is also a descent that is occurring. And that is a meeting point between the descent and the ascent when perfection comes. So that it has also to descend. It has also to descend. With our own power, we cannot ascend. And we cannot think that we will be reaching everywhere until the help comes from above also. You see, the divine has to help from above by descending itself. As the divine descends through avatar, in the morning I wrote that there are many levels of descent. Descent is a phenomenon which you have to understand in many different ways. We can have a whole program one day only on this one topic, descent of consciousness, and several lines. There are several lines along which the descent of the higher consciousness takes place, parallel lines that are occurring. One parallel line is that the higher levels of the mind, they can also descend. As we are ascending up, they are also descending. And before we have ascended, that descent is also creating that conditions, situations, which are actually helping us to ascend. So that descent is creating conditions which are helping us to also to ascend. So it's a very two-way process, very difficult to understand, but then you have to have in this mind that we alone do not have the capacity to go forward, to ascend like that. It is not so easy unless there is an opposite movement of descent, which is actually giving us all the feedbacks, which is actually helping us, which is upholding us, which is pulling us up. So this is about the spiritual mind range, which Sri Aurobindo says that it is an incessant gradation. Means there is no, what you call, they are not standalone phenomena. So it is something that is continuously going on. There is no gap anywhere. So all the different planes that are there, they are not standalone phenomena. They are not isolated phenomena. They are all linked together. So there is no gap anywhere. But from the point of view of the ascent of consciousness from our mind upwards through a rising series of dynamic powers by which it can sublimate itself, the gradation can be resolved into a stairway of 4 main ascents, each with its high level of fulfillment. So even though Sri Aurobindo says that it is a continuous process, one shifting into another, and that also shifting into something higher, but still to understand it, Sri Aurobindo has graded and resolved that stairway into 4 main ascents, 4 main staircases that go in one after another, each with this high level of fulfillment. So he talks about 4 main phenomena, 4 main ascents, or 4 main supracognitive planes, each with its own high level of fulfillment. Each has his own right, and each can be fulfilled in his own way. And with each you can go to the highest. So these gradations are a series of sublimations of consciousness, and these are the higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, and overmind. And where they are culminating in the divine gnosis or the supermind. So with these gradations, he calls as the higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, and overmind. And beyond them, the supreme culmination is a supermind or the divine gnosis, supermind or the divine gnosis. So these gradations are not ordinary cognitive faculties, but fields of consciousness force, Chit Shakti, where your cognitive faculties are getting upgraded. So it's not ordinary cognitive faculties. He's talking, we are just giving this slide to make, otherwise psychologists will think that we are talking about a upgradation of our present cognitive faculties. So this first sentence that I gave is to remove the confusion in modern psychological thinking that we are actually talking of upgrading our usual cognitive capacities. Of course not, we are not doing that. We are not upgrading our usual or our ordinary cognitive faculties. We are talking about new fields of consciousness force, where your cognitive faculties, if they go, they can be upgraded. If you go along, then you can have an upgradation. Each stage of this ascent implicates a total conversion of the being into a new light and power. So every step you take, you are actually converting your being in the light of a new consciousness, in the light of a new consciousness. And consciousness is made of both knowledge and power. So every step is bringing you new powers of new knowledge and new power. Not only knowledge, knowledge is coming with power and new types of power, higher types of power. So knowledge is coming with Shakti. Yeah, and this Shakti everywhere is everywhere you have an upgradation of Shakti. You have a newer vistas opening up with each level, where different types of Shaktis are opening one after another. So we will come to this, therefore we come now to this level of higher mind. Now what is the higher mind? Higher mind, you see that in our, is a mind which holds all our contradictory and complementary ideas together. Higher mind is a mind of mass ideation. Mass ideation. It is not a mind of exclusive thinking. It is a mind which contains all our contradictory and complementary ideas or thoughts together. So their strain, but it is not a rational mind. You see, in a rational mind, you cannot sustain with contradictions because you will be always biased towards one idea or the other idea. Rational mind, you cannot have a total synthesis. No? In rational mind, you will be always for one point or for the other point, one view or the other view, or for the thesis or for the antithesis. So you cannot expect to have a level playing field at the level of the ordinary cognition. Only when you go to the level of the higher mind, which holds all the contradictory and complementary ideas together, then only you can say that it is capable of mass ideation, and it doesn't have the strain of rational intellect. So one feels that a sea-like downpour of masses of knowledge experiences. When you go to that mind, higher mind, you see, it is not that all these things you have been saying for the first time. All these things come sporadically to every one of us, and to all people, to all seers, to all yogis, they have come through ages, but they have come sporadically. Sri Aurobindo expands it in a very systematic way. Sri Aurobindo sees the whole thing in a very systematic way that can be arranged and organized and developed. So there are always these seed ideas that have come to people. It's not that this is the first time Sri Aurobindo is telling all these things. It was always there, but it was being palpable in bits and in fragments. But now the Sri Aurobindo says that it can be developed. You can develop it, and it gives the grammar of development. And when you can experience that higher mind, you feel that knowledge is coming down like a sea, like down, like a sea. But it is so massive that you feel that it is a sea-like downpour, like a rainfall, but the rainfall not from the clouds but from the sea. Something is coming down. So in that way, you can feel that you are having an outburst of knowledge is coming to you, and it is automatic and spontaneous. What does that mean? That it is not culled from premises and data. The relation of idea with idea is not established by logic. The relation of idea and idea with idea is not established by logic, but they pre-exist and they emerge. And they are dynamic idea forces. So the ideas have an aspect of will. They generate forces and form. So each idea in the higher mind, it is associated with a willpower, such a willpower that can generate forces and forms, not an ordinary willpower, a constructive willpower. a will that can construct, a will that can generate something, a will that can make you construct an edifice of thought. So that's the higher mind, which is above our mind, which can contain. So if you can't understand this, it appears very difficult for you to understand. Just visualize that this is a field which contains all contradictory and complementary ideas together with the same weightage, with the same value, with the same power. Just think about that. If you think that this is very difficult to follow, just think that as we are all thinking in different ways, but each one of us can think with all the different paradigms together, and that is possible if you can go to the higher mind. Then I can think equally about democracy, and I can think equally about socialism. I can think equally about capitalism, and I can equally think about communism. I can think equally about one thing and the opposite of that thing. So I can be equally thinking of different things in different poises, in different ways. So I tell you again that if you can't follow this much, this written here, we are using the words used by Sri Aurobindo, mass ideation. Is Sri Aurobindo's words automatic and spontaneous and dynamic idea forces? These are the phrases he used. Just think that it is the mind which is holding all the things together, both complementary and contradictory, both complementary and contradictory. Everything is being held together, and you are holding it together. An individual, you as an individual, not different people are holding different ideas, and you have an equality among all yourselves, you have a harmony among yourselves. Not about that. We're not talking about that. We are talking about you yourself accommodating opposite ideas and complementary ideas together. You yourself holding complementary and contradictory ideas together. So that's the higher mind. So the higher mind, therefore, is a mind of mass ideation, of masses of ideas. These masses of ideas can come down into you as your downpour, that the sea is coming down into you. So it is like that. That feeling is like that. And it is automatic and spontaneous. It is not coming from your analysis. It is not coming from your analytical mind. So that is why it is not curled from premises. And relation of idea and idea is established not by logic. And dynamic idea forces, and their idea forces means each idea has a force, and that force is constructive. That force is dynamic. So it has a cosmic character. Therefore, when you go to the higher mind, this mind has a cosmic character. It doesn't carry the stamp of individual thinking. For example, when you are an individual, you will think in a way. Either you will think about socialism, or you will thinking about democracy, or you will thinking about rightist ideas or leftist ideas. I was always attracted to this higher mind because since when I was an adolescent, I always used to think that why do people differentiate between rightist and leftist? Why do they do that? Why can't we see the truth in its global way? Because truth is neither rightist nor leftist. Truth is naked. Truth is something which is naked. You cannot you cannot characterize truth in an exclusive way. And that is why the Anirbanji used to say that the greatest symbolization, that truth is naked and is not dependent on the way that we classify it. The greatest representation of that truth is that the truth can be represented by a single stone, the Shiva Lingam, which is just a stone, bare stone. It shows that truth is naked. You see the symbolism of the naked stone being representing the Supreme Lord, representing the Lord Shiva, is that the truth is naked. It doesn't require any ornaments. It doesn't require any crutches. It is just as it is. It is just as it is there. And this truth has a cosmic character. You cannot say that you're an individual owner of one kind of thing, or individual author of one kind of idea. That has no value there. At the level of higher mind, because you are equally conversant with socialism, you are equally conversant with the opposite of socialism. You are equally conversant with one thing, you are equally conversant with the opposite of the other thing. You see, thinking with opposites. Now, why I am emphasizing this again and again? Today, I think that time has come for us to shift from the ordinary cognitive consciousness to the higher mind, which holds contradictory ideas. Then only we can be free from all dogmatic thinking. If you see that all things that are going around the world, even today what is happening everywhere, even in our neighboring countries, what is happening, that it is dogmatic ideas that are ruling, whether it is in the field of religion, in the field of politics, in the field or in other fields also, that it is dogmatic ideas that are actually ruling and causing all sorts of problems. Problems in the world are caused by overvalued ideas. You see, you put more value on that idea which that idea deserves. You see, overvalued ideas is not delusion. You have a schizophrenic patients, they suffer from delusional ideas. A delusion is a false belief that cannot be corrected by logic. A false belief that cannot be corrected by logic. And we think that the schizophrenics are dangerous. But the people who are religious leaders, political leaders, they are not schizophrenics. We don't tell them that they are mental patients. But they have overvalued ideas. And that overvalued ideas they try to enforce on us, on people, on masses, on the proletariat. The overvalued ideas. No? They give more value to that idea than that idea deserves. And today the whole world is suffering, whether it is dogmatism or when the people are youngsters are taken and they are radicalized. No? We say that they are radicalized. They are brainwashed into believing that one sort of terrorist ideology. So we say that they are radicalized. So all this is happening because only one set of idea is being given to them, a set of overvalued ideas. And the only way we can be free from all these things, we can start by shifting in evolutionary consciousness from our present level of cognitive mind, which holds all these contradictions, to the higher mind, which is beyond contradictions. I think it is you can take it up. All of you who are here, you can just think about it. Because if I am asked from Sri this view, what is the first step that should be taken to world unity? You see, then in a very general way, of course, in the spiritual sense, that is being united with the psychic being, because it is at the level of the soul that we are all united. But then that is a very big thing. You can't tell that to people that go and be united with your soul. And you go and tell that to people who are there in different countries, in different religions, that go and you may be united with your soul. Can you go and shout that in Afghanistan? You can't. But to all people of the world, because everybody is interested in education, you can say, without using Sri Aurobindo's name, you can say that we can raise our status of thinking to a poise where we are not under exclusivism, exclusive thinking we are not doing. We'll be accommodating all types of ideas. Once we do this, we are doing a great service to humanity. We are freeing humanity from dogmatism. It's a great thing. I think that the future unity of the world depends upon our shift from the present cognitive status to the status of the higher mind. So this is very important. I emphasize it everywhere where I go because I want this is something we should give enough time to think about it. So this is, and then I told you that the higher mind also descends. You see that the higher planes of consciousness, they also descend. Only not, we are not starting to evolve with thinking about contradictory and complementary ideas together, but the higher mind is also descent. And in its descent, it creates beautiful conditions at times. How? By releasing idea forces, and mankind tries to exceptionally try to fulfill those idea forces, try to make that into realize those idea forces. Now, many times this is happening. This is always happening throughout history. This is always happening throughout history, that the higher mind is also descending from above. It is not that only we are ascending, it is descending. And in its descent, it is releasing idea forces. And each idea force is wanting to realize itself in many ways. For example, I give you 2 examples or 3 examples I will give you. One is the idea force that Indian spirituality should enter the whole world, especially the Western world at that time. So in 1893, you see that idea force that Indian spirituality has now come to a point where it has to enter into the whole world. And at that time, though, it was important to enter into the Western world, but actually in the whole world, then only its importance will be felt. So the Indian spirituality has to acquire a new way of presenting itself. Indian spirituality has to come out. Indian spirituality has to come out of the caves and the forests. It has to come out from the from the hermitages. It has to come out from the places where they were hidden. and it has now to come to the surface. It has to come to the surface. It has to be made available to everyone. So this was an idea force that Indian spirituality so long nurtured and kept aside in secret, in hermitages, in ashrams, in gurukuls, in our caves, in our forests. They have now to come out in the open. They have to come out to the whole world. And this idea force in 1893, you see three movements occurring at the same time. Same time, these three movements, these three things happened. Swami Vivekananda went from India, he went to America. From India, he went to America. He said that is the first time that Indian spirituality was officially entering the West. Sri Aurobindo came from England to India. Sri Aurobindo came from England to India, same time, to consolidate a different type of consciousness and force for the future. At the same time, Mahatma Gandhi traveled from India to South Africa. Again, he was also bringing up a new way of politics. You see, you might not agree with Mahatma Gandhi. That is another fact. There are many what do you call things of him which have a lot of controversy among people. But we are not going into that. But you see the phenomenon that passive resistance, because the world was always accustomed to having wars with each other, and passive resistance being there. That too in the place of South Africa, and making it, or trying to make it there active. This passive resistance is he's trying to make active the idea of passive resistance. So that is something which is a phenomenon. And it is, if the backing of spirituality was not there, you could not have done it. So you see that Indian spirituality, that idea force is trying to manifest in these ways. Then again, very interesting thing. Another thing preceded this 1893. You see, the same time, the American Independence Manifesto that was presented by Jefferson, and it was followed by the French Revolution. So they both were talking about liberty, both were talking about equality. So liberty and equality, both were talking about. You see, it was the idea force behind that equality that was being enforced in the world, and in different places it was being acted out in different ways. I will say that the idea force behind global unity in 1926. Very interesting. I have not given here the full thing. I think in day after next day I will give you that all the things that happened in 1926, with Sri Aurobindo's descent of the overmind. Same time, on the same year, the Taylor Tichade, the Taylor Tichade, he came up with this concept of noosphere, and he took two colleagues. He had two colleagues, and this noosphere, this concept of noosphere is very, very similar to the concept of the overmind. And then at the first time, Jan Smart was a South African philosopher. He used the word holism. The holism in the Western world, it was not used. He was the first person to use the word holism. And the overmind is what? It is global cognition. It is holistic cognition. You see, in overmind is holistic cognition, is global cognition. And you see that same year in 1926, all these things are happening, that people who are receptive, Sri Aurobindo is bringing down the overmind, and that force is so strong that in France, in Paris, three people are sitting and they're talking about the noosphere. And then in South Africa, somebody is coming up with the term holism. Somebody else also at that time wrote an article on the postmortem survival of consciousness. Postmortem survival of consciousness. I think he was a French psychomathematician, Charles Starter. He died very soon in that year itself. So you see that the idea force behind global unity, that truth force is wanting to bring that idea into front. And now why it is interesting, I will tell you, because just to give an example of the extent to which the vision can go. In 1917, you see, this Sri Aurobindo had explained. I am talking about actually the previous slide where the global unity idea force behind global unity in 1926, how it become powerful. You can understand from Sri Aurobindo's something else which Sri Aurobindo had detailed in 1917. In 1917, Sri Aurobindo had talked about the caliphate. You see the ISIS which you are talking now. The ISIS of which you are talking now, that in 1917, Sri Aurobindo had written about the caliphate exactly the same way in which it is happening today. Today, what is happening with ISIS, Sri Aurobindo has said that. You see, in 1917, Sri Aurobindo explained that the caliphate that is to be abolished, it can still survive as a purely religious headship. But then even if that survival, it will be threatened by the rise of new spiritual and national movements in Persia, Arabia, and Egypt. This is 1917. and caliphate was abolished by Mustafa Kemal in 1924, and they tried to revive it in 1926. All efforts were made to revive the caliphate, but they failed. You see, I will say that the main reason why they failed to revive the caliphate in 1926, because 1926 was the year where the idea force of global unity was coming, was descending, and was very powerful. So the Overmind here, the Nusphere there, the holism there, in the other place. So all these things were coming, and you see this when the things come from the higher mind, that the idea forces are so powerful, like sea-like downpour. Now that the sea-like downpour, no? The sea is not rainwater, it's sea, and it is so powerful that it can obliterate other things. So you see that efforts to revive the caliphate failed in 1926, and you can then understand the power of 1926, the power of the idea force behind world unity in 1926. And then you see again, Sri Aurobindo's higher mind is again telling, Sri Aurobindo is not talking about the future as an astrologer. He's talking about the future from the higher mind. He's not talking of the future from the level of an astrologer. He's talking from the level of the higher mind. He says the old forms of Asiatic monarchy and theocracy supposed to disappear post World War I could be revived. And in 2014, you say ISIS was revived. And today you see the Taliban in Afghanistan. What Sri Aurobindo said in 1917, exactly that is happening. That the old forms of Asiatic monarchy and theocracy, which was supposed to disappear after the World War, they can be revived. And he again said, and this is extremely interesting. And this is a pointer also. And yesterday when I was seeing that women had come out in Afghanistan to protest against the Taliban, then I was also feeling the importance of this line, which has said that future will be decided by what? Not by theocracy, but by a new intelligentsia. New intelligentsia increasing in energy. And these are these exact words, new intelligentsia, increasing in energy, and the settled will to arrive and bound to become increasingly dynamic. That will become dynamic by reason of the inherited force of spirituality. So the solution to the problems that we are now facing with all this kind of fundamentalist forces, especially that we are seeing there, and because we were saying that in connection with the caliphate, you see that this theocracy will be countered by a new intelligentsia. And today, if you know, if you read the literature of very intellectual people from these areas, like Syria, where the ISIS and all it is operating, there are very sensible people there also. And now what they are coming up with is that it is not that ISIS is concerned, or these fundamentalist forces are concerned with the conflict between Islam and other religions, but more important, between the superficial spirituality and deep spirituality. This is the fight is more between the superficial religious ideas and deep spirituality, rather than this religion against other religions. That's why you see internecine conflicts. There are conflicts within Islam itself that is going on, because this struggle now, as Sri Aurobindo said, that inherited force of spirituality will bring out a new intelligentsia, and that is going to happen. And that is actually going to be the savior, not all our external means, not our economic means, not our defense strategies, not our political maneuverings, nothing. It will come up that. It will come up in a new way, and you will be there to see that this, what Sri Aurobindo says, will be coming true. So, but higher mind at a level, it needs to be surpassed. Why it needs to be surpassed? Because it is not the end. One is that it has a resistance from ordinary thinking. It has a resistance from the inconscience that it cannot overcome. But the ordinary mind builds and breaks mental constructions again and again. Higher mind, the structures go on expanding. For example, if I believe in democracy and I have to today believe in capitalism, then I have to deconstruct my idea of democracy and construct in a new way the idea of capitalism. So in my ordinary human cognition, if I have to bring in a new idea, I have to deconstruct the previous opposite idea. You see, if I have to deconstruct, I was a communist, then I want to be, so I want to be a spiritual person. So I have to deconstruct my communistic ideas, and then I have to build up my spiritual base. But in the higher mind, it is not like that. Everything gets added over everything. Things get added one after another. Things get added one after another. And when things get added one after another, what happens? After some time, it is beyond control. Then you have to go to something above. You see, in the higher mind, structures go on expanding. There is a greater totality of truth known, but a totality capable of infinite enlargement. And if you go on infinitely enlarging, you can get lost on the way, lost in the way. See, the structures go on expanding, expanding, expanding. You add everything together. And then at one certain point in time, that expansion is so great. The expansion is so great that you can get lost in that enlargement. So then you have to shift to something higher. And that higher is the illumined mind, which is a conceptual spiritual principle. Is a higher mind, is a domain of the thinker. Higher mind is a domain of the thinker, but thought is so powerful. Thought is so powerful, and thought has to be powerful because knowledge has to be communicated. The thinker needs to communicate knowledge in words. But the illumined mind is the domain of the seer, the mystic. But the body of truth is suddenly revealed, suddenly illumined. You don't need words for expressing it. You see, it is a place where you don't need words for expressing it. Sudden illumination, a sudden illumination. Of course, it can happen. You see, when you are standing, it might happen once when you were standing in front of a samadhi, suddenly something told you that this is the truth. You see, no, there was no logic in it. There was no logic in it. There was no rationality in it. There was no thinking about it. Something straight away you felt a certain thing. Or in meditation, suddenly you felt something inside you, a warmth. You suddenly felt some warmth. You caught that warmth, and you know that you have gotten something you could understand. That there is something deep inside. Might be not the whole soul, but you can understand that something was there deep inside. Deep inside, you could understand something. Or you have made your mind extremely silent, and then suddenly that silence, you could see that many things have become clear. So that's in the illumined mind. Sherman uses the word, very beautiful word, phrase he uses, a revelatory ideograph. Revelatory ideograph. That's the illumined mind. The revelatory ideograph is a direct vision of the essence of what is sought for. It is a direct vision of the essence of what is sought for. It is a greater illumination, instinct with an increased power and intensity and driving force, a luminosity of the nature of truth sight with thought formulation as a minor and dependent activity. So it's a vision that is important. Thought formulation will happen, but that is minor. It is a derivative. The illumined mind is a mind not of higher thought, but of spiritual light. It comes very rarely. Might be a moment in life you have felt that something was just, you felt something and that was the truth. Afterwards, you know that what you felt was the truth. So that's the revelatory ideograph. It can happen. It's not something that is totally unknown. It can happen. And then characteristic of the illumined mind is it can bring a fiery ardor of realization, a rapturous ecstasy of knowledge, a vast descent of peace. You can understand that if you're standing in front of the samadhi and suddenly something goes and strikes you, and then you can feel that something is there. Something immobile is there, something immovable is there, something solid is there, something solid, which might be a vast peace, or something is there so fulfilling you feel. Might be very rare. It might have happened to you 3 or 4 times in life, or once in life, and you felt that extreme fulfilling. And it is accompanied by luminous enthusiasm of inner force and power, swifter than the higher mind. So there is an inner force and power that is accompanying the illumined mind, which is swifter than the higher mind. So it is of a higher grade. And this revelatory power has an integrating effect on the whole system. So it has an integrating effect on the whole system. Your mind is illumined, your feelings are dynamized, your senses are enriched, your physical mind gets off the inertia. When you have this experience of suddenly something has been revealed to you, you just have a gush of something inside you, have a gush of something, some warmth or some just a light that you feel, or just a silence that you feel, which explains everything. We have so many people, they have come to the samadhi not knowing anything of Sri Aurobindo, but they came there and suddenly they felt the silence, felt something, and then that was all. They were all, they knew that this was their place. So something was there which was so powerful, so solid, something had an integrating effect on the whole system. So their mind was illumined in that way. The physical mind shuts off the inertia, the feelings are dynamized, the senses are enriched. So this kind of thing happens with the illumined mind. I will give an example from different levels how you can see the same individual. You can see from different levels. You see from the ordinary mind, the same individual that we are seeing is an ego-bound personality. From the ordinary mind, if you are studying one human being, and you can just see the aspect of the ego-bound personality from the ordinary mind. From the higher mind, then if you try to understand that person, then you will also see that he has not only have personality, he has an impersonality also. a ego transcending impersonality. So that individual not only has a personality, but has also an ego transcending impersonality. So there is a dimension of impersonality also. When you go to the illumined mind, then one step further, then you realize that both this personality and this impersonality is being supported by a spiritual substance, which you cannot understand by thought, by logic. You can understand only by realization or something like a vision, or something that you felt inside, deep inside, in an inner vision. In an inner vision, you feel something inside. As I'm saying, a common thing that happen to many people here who are attending this session, who might have stood in front of the samadhi, and at that time it has happened that something was there very strong and which told you that this is the truth. And so that truth is a spiritual substance. In the illumined mind, you understand that there is a spiritual substance that supports both the personality and the impersonality. But then, higher than the illumined mind, you see, Shabinda says that the higher mind and illumined mind, they also have to be surpassed, and they find their united completeness. He has used that word, united completeness, in something higher, which is intuition. And in intuition, what has happened? At the level of true intuition, not the word intuition which we loosely use. Intuition we very loosely use in a different way. We'll come there tomorrow where we use intuition in a different way. We Shabinda uses a spiritual intuition. And that intuition, a higher intuition, then you can realize that the spiritual substance that you felt at the illumined mind is also something which is also something structured, and it has a mutable poise, it has an immutable poise. It has an immutable poise in the Jivatma, which doesn't take part in the evolution, a non-evolutionary or a non-evolving poise. And it has mutable poise which goes on changing, and there's a psychic being, the portion of the Jivatma that is projected into the manifestation. So you see, the same person at different levels of the mind, at the different levels of cognition, newer and newer vistas of the individual being open up to you. The individual is seen in different ways. So the ordinary mind, what you see as the ego-bound personality, and the higher mind, you can see as the ego transcending impersonality too. You don't expect that modern rational psychology will immediately understand the higher mind until it understands its limitations. And then when you go to the illumined mind, then you feel that there is a spiritual substance supporting both. And then you go beyond the illumined mind, then you find that it is a structure, something, the soul substance is also structured. The substance of the soul is also has a structure. And in the structure, there is a mutable poise and there is an immutable poise. And that's intuition. And our mind and illumined mind, they get their complete satisfaction in that, or the completeness in that intuition in which we will be dealing tomorrow. We are exactly 5 and we just need 5 minutes for a break, and when we come back. So James, it is okay for a break for 5 minutes?
Certainly, okay? Yeah. Let's do that. Yeah, thanks.
So we can start. Yes. So I will start
Yes,
with this. Yes. Very beautiful question. This Sandra has said that we are taught about silencing our mind. Actually, silencing our mind, will come to that on the day when we talk about intuition, is the basic prerequisite. Now, why we want to silence our mind to feel the presence? Why do we want to silence our mind? So that we will not think. Then Sri has given so much food for thought. He has written volumes and volumes. Not only he has written things, each point he has come up in different ways, as if to improve our way of thinking. But leave aside that. You see, why we are wanting to make our mind silent? It's very, very specific. Our mind is usually occupied with very trivial thoughts, which are the result of the what we call, which Sri calls the physical mind. There are many levels of the mind. So mostly what we call, we are living in a world where our physical mind is very active. The physical mind is the mind which is always dealing with trivial thoughts, trivial ideas, or everyday things. For example, when you have come out of the house, you are thinking whether you have locked the house properly, whether you have put off the geyser, whether your child has returned home from school in a good way, whether there's not an accident on the road, or very small trivial things which we can do without it, but they all come swarming in our mind. And then there is, of course, vital mind, with the vital mind which has its turbulences, thinkings, emotions, no? Which disturb all these, all of our usual harmony which is disturbed. Now, because our usual mind, even if the vital mind is controlled, you have done Buddhistic, you have followed Buddhistic sermons, and you have got over your desires, and you have silenced your vital mind, but still the physical mind is active, because the physical mind is the mind which is concerned with your physical consciousness, and below the physical mind is what Sri Aurobindo calls the mechanical mind, is that mind which is mechanically moving on and on and on and on. And because of this presence of this physical and mechanical mind, great creative ideas, the higher consciousness cannot come down and settle in our mind. When we talk about, when Sri Aurobindo talks about silencing the mind, he is wanting to make the mind silent. He is wanting to make the mind silent so that the mind is receptive to higher things. The motivation for making the mind silent is the mind has to be receptive to the higher things. Of course, what you are saying, to feel the presence is of course there. It is a psychic being where you can, it is always there, but you can feel the psychic being in the psychic presence. At the level of the mind where all thoughts are going on, you can't feel the presence there. It is not possible to feel the presence there. Only then you have to work on higher levels. Then you can only have what you call. Then only you can have vision of what you want to know, or the truth from the level of mind. The other thing is this, that we are silencing the mind so that the higher consciousness manifests in the mind. Sri Aurobindo is not wanting to do away with the world. Then you would not have written poetry, or you would not have written future poetry, or you would not have wanted to make human life a life divine. You would not have wanted to do that. So he's wanting to perfect life. To perfect life, our mind has to be accustomed to higher thoughts, to what you call gradually and gradually the thoughts that lead us to the supramental thoughts, the supramental ideas, ideas which are effective, ideas which have an accompanying willpower that can make the idea effective. It's very difficult. Very difficult. Immediately, you cannot have such an idea. You don't have such ideas. But the silencing of the mind is a basic thing. If you tell me, we'll show that to you on the next day, intuition, tomorrow itself, that the 4 basic ways how to cultivate this higher consciousness in the higher levels of cognition. The first thing is that you have to make the mind silent. Unless you make the mind silent, you cannot have this experience of the higher mind, illumined mind, and the intuitive mind. So contrary to what you say, that it will not increase mind chatter, it will actually give you mental clarity. Mind chatter is a thing which is being controlled, which is being done by the physical mind and the mechanical mind. And that is why all over the world, in all spiritual traditions and religious traditions, there has been used the word japa, that japa, J-A-P-A, japa, or what you call that you ruminate on the same mantra. Why japa came? This phenomenon of japa, the chanting mantras, why it came? It came because mind is always involved in this mind chatter, what you say, your term. So that's why instead of chattering the same thing, let us repeat. If you have to repeat anything, instead of repeating the usual humdrum things, let me repeat the name of the Lord. If I repeat the name of the Lord, or if I repeat the mantra, then actually my whole being is going to be galvanized. And this is why japa was brought into all religious systems, not for great spiritual realizations like Nirvikalpa Samadhi, not for that. It was just brought to control this mind, because unless this mind was controlled, this mind was not able to do other greater things. So this mind of which is the physical mind and the mechanical mind are obstructions which are known, which are recognized everywhere all along the line. And we have to make our mind silent only so that the mind is clean from all this chattering, so that the higher consciousness, the higher things can come and the higher thoughts will be expressed. Yes, polarization of ideas in our culture is an Asuric, yes, you can say that. It is an Asuric technique because it is something very biased. And progressing towards the higher mind, you have to be free from that, which is correct, which Rick says is correct. Now, the brainstorming session at the workplace to resolve a difficult problem is different. That you have to use it is a mixture of many things. You actually you have to use a little bit of intuition to do it. You have a brainstorming session at the workplace, then there is an impasse, and to solve that impasse, you have to come to a suddenly you have to have an intuitive opening up, and then something can be clear. So, and until people are ready for the higher mind, you see, people are not ready. Or you are there in the office with everybody, so everybody is not prepared to work on their mind. But still, if you are yourself working on, you can bring a higher light from the intuitive plane and give. But the intuition will give you a sudden glimpse of something that has to be done, and then you have to know that you have to have faith in bringing that to front of everyone. We'll talk about that. Mr. Nair will talk about that in the overmind. And we have the overmind day after tomorrow. We will talk about that. An example of thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis is given multiple times, showing how he has synthesized. I think that the best synthesis in the synthesis of yoga, Shobindu's synthesis of yoga is the best example, where he has brought all the different systems in India which were actually having differences among themselves. He has brought all of them together, and behind it, he has brought Tantra, which nobody was bringing. Even the synthesis of Gita Tantra was not brought. The Sri Aurobindo brought Tantra behind, and then in front, his own idea of supramental. So in the middle, he resolved the contradictions of all the conflicting schools of thought in India. Behind it, he had the Tantra, and in front, he had the his supramental vision. And together with that, he made that grand synthesis, which was the second synthesis after the synthesis of Gita. You see, the synthesis of Gita, which the words of the different, where love, knowledge, and works, they were synthesized to form to be presented as a knowledge in the Gita. That was one synthesis, which was the basic synthesis. After that, the next synthesis has been done by Sri Aurobindo, where it brings all the traditions, all idea forces, everything as he has brought. So that, I think, is a very big, very interesting example of synthesis. And then if you read between the lines, you will see the different theistic and schools, how he has resolved the differences, how he went on resolving the differences, placing each of them in its different perspective. So he has taken the truths, the essential truths of all systems, and he has put them into a huge, what you call, not hierarchy. Ken Gilbert used the word holarchy. I mean, what he coined, a holarchy. The hierarchy gives a different impression of something higher and something lower. A holarchy is where everything can exist in the same way. It's the same thing, but in a word that is more presentable, holarchy. So he has put everything in that holarchy to make that grand synthesis. And if you read between the lines, you will see the smaller synthesis. If you see within the different dualistic and the monistic and the different schools of different types of dualism and all, so continuously he has gone that synthesizing, and then until he has come to the grand synthesis. So that is one very beautiful thing that you can always follow. Lateral thinking as a practical approach in the collective spirit. Of course, lateral thinking is also something to be encouraged. Then people also, children also must be encouraged to think in a lateral way. Otherwise, our repertoire will not increase. Our repertoire of thinking will not increase. The lateral thinking is also important at our level, at this level of consciousness. Lateral thinking is also a stepping stone. Then we know at one time it has to be surpassed, but lateral thinking has to be encouraged. But then what we do is that we view it with so much suspicion. No? We view lateral thinking with so much. As Naipaul, the Nobel laureate from West Indies, who was also an Indian Indian by culture, so he had said about the crucifixion. You see, there is a meaning of crucifixion, which is a spiritual meaning. There's an occult meaning of crucifixion. But then Naipaul also came and said, "Oh, if Jesus was alive today, he would have been executed in an electric chair. So would you have worshipped the chair that you are worshipping the cross now?" So this is an example that you're seeing the thing from a different way. But of course, that cross has a different significance. Mother has given the occult significance of the cross. So that's different. But that doesn't mean that you should not do lateral thinking. It will actually enlarge your, what you call, repertoire of your consciousness. To give you a simple example of thesis, antithesis, and their synthesis, I would say that if you find among in our ashram itself, we had the example of uh, Sadhak who has passed away recently, and who was a very big communist, and he was such a big communist that he was allowed by Nehru. He was in jail, and then Nehru told him that I will release you from jail. So that was the first Afro-Asian solidarity. That Afro-Asian solidarity of communists was being held for training of youth communist leaders all over the world. So it was being held in Indonesia, and he went to Nehru for permission, and Nehru said that I can give you permission if you don't escape to China. But then he told me that I had also had an idea of escaping to China. So, and but eventually three of them went and met D.N. Idit, who was the third greatest communist leader at that time, the first one of Asia. So the first was Mao Zedong, and the second was Ho Chi Minh, and the third was D.N. Idit. And there, you see what happened, this progress towards synthesis, that he has to live that, that he has to come to an antithesis of communism, came himself in front of D.N. Idit. In front of, at that time, what happened that all over the world, there was this talk going on, because Khrushchev had exposed for the first time in a very big gathering about what Stalin did, the excesses of Stalin. And everybody was silent. No? In that auditorium, everybody was silent. And the person who I'm telling, who was a sadhak in our ashram, and who was steeped in communism, and also that he was steeped in communism again because he came from a royal family, and from that royal family, seeing all that poverty around, then he came, that was again a thesis, different levels of thesis, antithesis going on in the same person. So seeing that poverty all around, and himself coming from a royal family, and that poverty all around, that he made him to fight, or to what you call flee from that royalty, from that royalty to communism. That fleeing was also a type of thesis, antithesis, because he was dismayed with the sort of poverty all around that place. And then when he came to D.N. Idit, and when he stood there and he asked D.N. Idit, sir, what was your reaction? Because you were present in the meeting when Khrushchev told about Stalin's excesses. What was your reaction when you heard that? This our sadhak asked, would be sadhak. At that time he was not he was a communist. So he asked D.N. Idit, what was your reaction? And then D.N. Idit sat dumbfounded, because he never expected an Indian college student to ask that question. And he and in helplessness, he put his hand over his head, showing that he was very helpless. And that struck a chord. That struck a chord in him. You see that a chord can strike in many different ways. It's not that because you are thinking. And then when he came back, then the Communist Party made an article, had an article on Sri Aurobindo in their communist, very popular communist journal, and he felt that he didn't know anything about Sri Aurobindo, but he felt that it was just like a boar, B-O-A-R, boar, a pig that is hitting a mountain. The effect of the article is such. And that moment he was passing in Calcutta below Sri Aurobindo Path Mandir in College Street, and then he found, let me go up and see, and that was the day before the mother's birthday. And then he came and saw that was a different world that could be given a try. And then afterwards, he synthesized in himself the effects of socialism and the effects of the good things that he brought into his spiritual perspective. You see that he didn't enjoy his royal money that he had. He didn't do that. So he took that cue from socialism, and he distributed that money in a way a socialist, exactly as socialist should do. And of course, a large chunk of money has been given to the blind, and money has been offered to the ashram also. So he did it as a way, exactly as a socialist could do, exactly as a communist would do. He did that. But at the same time, he imbibed that spirituality from where he could see it in a different way in his own being. He imbibed the spirituality. He never ceased to be what you call the good things that he had amassed when he was having these leftist ideas. But when he came to spirituality, he integrated all of them into his being. And that's why he became so popular all over India as India's best short story writer, and one of the best, India's one of the most popular, what you call, authors, and traversing all many ranges and respected by everybody. So everybody was respecting him. And throughout his stay in the ashram, I have known personally that in our generation of communists, they all used to come and they used to also meet him and take. And that's why I think, that is why I don't know, but many factors must have been there, because the Communist Party in India took a decision not to say anything against Sri Aurobindo. They had taken a conscious decision not to say anything against Sri Aurobindo, and they have not disturbed Sri Aurobindo. They have not disturbed him in the level of theory or other things. They have never disturbed him. All these things have added to that synthesis. A single person in his individuality is accommodating so many things, and there is the train of thoughts are happening. So much so that in the history of the Communist Party movement in India, in the first volume, they have acknowledged that the Sri Aurobindo is the first person in India to use the word proletariat. So that amount of respect they have given to him. So I would say that this is a continuously dynamic process. This synthesis, we are all going on doing it between ourselves also. We are doing the same thing. That thesis, antithesis, synthesis, something is going on. When we have come to the spiritual path, then continuously we are also in the same process. We all have our own stories. I was just telling the story of this, our very revered senior sadhak who has passed away this year. But it is something in a small way, it happens to many of us. So from DNID to Sri Aurobindo, from Indonesia, DNID to Sri Aurobindo is a big thing. Anyway, what we reiterate that thinking is something which have to elevate. Which this the question that was asked first, that our commonplace thinking or our mind chatter is something with which we are always involved. So we have to replace that mind chatter with very positive thinking. I actually would tell this to this this question, mind chatter, that Mother has described the mind as a big palace. In the palace, there is an Am Darbar, that is a general courtroom, where all sorts of people come. So there are all sorts of thoughts are there. It's a market. My mother said, mother used the word marketplace of thoughts. Then that is in a big palace, there's a junk room where you don't want the things that people should see are kept. So we have a junk room of our mind where we don't want all painful things, or things that we have seen and we are shocked. For example, I had seen an accident, people dying in front of me. I don't want to remember it again and again. So I've kept that in my junk room. From that junk room, sometimes they come up to the surface. They come up when they come up in our dreams. In the dreams, the junk room door opens and they come up in our dreams. When we have psychotic attacks, psychotic breakdowns, or what we call schizophrenic breakdowns, then the junk room opens. And of course, when you take a lot of alcohol, the junk room opens. So much so that when a young girl comes and tells me, sir, I have fallen in love, but I don't know whether the fellow loves me truly. I said, give him alcohol, make him drink. Then while he is drunk, what he says, if he still says, I love you, then he really loves you. But that time he starts shouting at you that you know that is the real thing that is inside his junk room. So there's a simple test you can do. So anyway, but that big palace, as mother said, there has got a rooftop room where the first sunlight comes. So the first sunlight comes in the rooftop room where we don't stay. We always usually stay in the lower rooms. We don't stay in the room above, which is the rooftop room. And the rooftop room, that is the place where the light comes. That is the place of the mind where the creative thoughts come. So we don't stay in that place. All that we are wanting to do, this higher mind, illumined mind, is to open ourselves to the creative thoughts, open ourselves to the what you call the great thought waves that are going there. So we have to be very careful. We have to develop all our things. In integral yoga means that integrally we develop ourselves. We develop ourselves at all in all our planes of consciousness. We develop ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be like that. Like as mother said, that day we told you twice. I told you yesterday and before yesterday that people go to that substratum ego after conquering the ego and they think that they have reached the Brahman. It's not like that. That's why, so that we just don't fall in that trap, we have to actually march integrally in all levels of consciousness. We'll do an exercise to take from in the day we do intuition, we'll do a little bit of exercise to see that we can start how we can lift our consciousness, lift our consciousness from the center of our consciousness. We have to lift it from our mind, from the level of our mind. I will try to do that exercise tomorrow. So lift our center of consciousness above our cognitive mind. so that the mind is opens up to the higher ranges, to the higher mind, and it is receptive to intuition. So very thank you that you have given this. We'll do this exercise tomorrow. So that's just what Sri Aurobindo recommended. Lift the center of consciousness above the mind. So we'll do that. This exercise is actually, we have a plan tomorrow to give you this in synthesis of yoga. So long I have been talking to you, whatever I've been talking to you, I've been talking exclusively from the life divine. Synthesis of yoga is a practical application of what is there in the life divine. From there, we'll talk about 4 things, 4 exercises which we can do. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and if we have time, we'll try to within 3-4 minutes each of the 4 we can try tomorrow, or at least 2 of the 4 we can try tomorrow. So any other comment by anyone? Anybody would like to comment or add something? Manan, would you like to add something?
Sure, I think it was very nice. I'm actually taking the notes, so I'm focused on that. But, I was reading something from Sri Aurobindo recently where he was talking about dynamic self-giving. And I think it is from Synthesis of Yoga. And also he was linking it to the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna is ready, then Sri Krishna tells him about dynamic self-giving. And I was kind of imagining as we were journeying along with you that this is probably something that personally for me, I should kind of contemplate upon, how to kind of have a silent mind and yet be able to be very active and conscious in the world. So something like that. Yeah. But thank you. Very nice sessions again, Baba.
Because it is silence that gives power. It is silence that gives power. Power doesn't come from activity. Power comes from the base of silence.
Yeah, true. Okay, thank you so much. Lots of gratitude to you and to Nama. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr.
When
Basu,
I was talking about the confession box, then I thought that if people have some questions, I said, and they wanted to say something which they shouldn't say publicly, I said, then you are a confession box. Monica is a good confession box. They can tell it to you.
So I just wanted to add on to the beautiful session today, something on silencing the mind and the whole being, again from the mother and Sri Aurobindo. So something which works for me, and very, very practical suggestions from the mother is, mother says that when you are going to bed, when you are lying down on the bed, just still your being so powerfully, call peace and still your body as if you are a towel on a bed. Don't move at all. And I've been practicing this, and I think it's really, really very powerful how this peace comes in the being, the mind, emotions, and the whole being gets silenced. And mother says that if you want to rest in this poise, then it would be a nice rest. And even in short hours, you will be feeling refreshed. The other thing that I wanted to add on was when you were talking about the chatter of the mind. So in in Powers Within, this compilation by A.S. Dalal, where mother shares power of thought, and there she shares that owing to the fact that we have the constant chatter going on and on and on mechanically in the mind. So if you want to run your mind in certain direction, run it in a positive direction. So imagine that, the divine is really helping me and I'm guided to more light and illumination. So instead of going into the negative slope of imaginations, one can go into the higher slope of imaginations also. So again, something from the mother, which I thought I would share. Thank you. Anything from you, James?
Yeah, I just repeating the words peace, peace, peace instills a certain dynamic silence in my being. So, that works for me very nicely. Yeah. Thank you, Monica. And thank you very much indeed, Dr. Basu.
James, can I share something?
Please, yes, Shilpa, please.
Yeah, this morning I was reading in Mother's book, The Mother's Yoga, which is a compilation from Mother's Agenda, and she talks about being like a water lily with the leaves floating, to be still and quiet. And I found that quite a visual, because here, of course, in the UK, we at the moment also have a lot of water lilies. And recently a lot of people have been sharing pictures of water lilies. And, just to a visual of the leaf, which is sort of nice and big and just open and just floating, and the water lily
Yeah,
opening up.
that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So when mother sort of says this, be a water lily, if you have to be a vegetable, then be a water lily.
Yeah.
So that was fantastic.
Okay. Dr. Basu, it was a magnificent session, really interesting. Thank you very much indeed. So we meet again at 4 o'clock tomorrow evening. And until then, goodbye everyone, and have a good evening. And open up your mental regions to the higher mind, the descent of the higher mind. Thank you very much, Dr. Basu. Monica, bye.
Yeah, bye, James. Bye.
Bye, Monica.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manan.
Pleasure. This is mother's work. Thank you so much for the opportunity,
Thanks.
James.
Thank you.
No,
for
it's great. You're really great. Thanks. Okay.